Today, the National Press Club, Executive Director of the International Energy Agency, Dr. Fatih Birol. Dr. Birol will consider the outlook for global energy markets and the implications for energy security, competitiveness and sustainability. Dr. Fatih Birol with today's National Press Club address.
Janet, a member of the board here at the club and a journalist with the ABC. For those in our international audience today, and there could be a few of them, that's the Australian Broadcasting Corporation. Now, journalists, analysts, traders, politicians and I suppose consumers all over the world are desperate to gain some understanding right now of where the war in the Middle East is heading and what it might mean for fuel prices. In the many millions of words that have been written since the end of February about what's being experienced, these are 12, you'll probably agree, of the most confronting. Quote, the largest supply disruption in the history of the global oil market. Well, that conclusion was authored only last week by our special guest today, Dr. Fatih Birol, the Executive Director of the International Energy Agency. He's normally based in Paris, so it's not only astonishing that Dr. Birol can be here at this time, but also that he has generously offered to spend up to or around an hour to explain as much as can be explained presently what's happening and what the implications of the war remain to be. Now, for those familiar with the regular format here at the National Press Club, we're not actually following it today. Dr. Birol won't give us a prepared speech. For good reason, I think. It may be wise given the fluidity of the situation. Instead, I'll tease out some questions with him and some opening observations, and then we'll throw it open to questions. Just some background for those not familiar with Fatih Birol. Even if the International Energy Agency feels like we're in uncharted waters at present, it's worth remembering so were Columbus and James Cook at one time. There are few better equipped than Fatih Birol to at least attempt to navigate some coordinated responses to the current crunch. He's really spent, I think it's fair to say, his entire adult life preparing for it. He was born in Turkey, originally trained as an engineer, then became an energy economist specialising in oil markets. As he was educated in that phase in Austria, he worked at OPEC. He moved to the IEA 30 years ago and he's now clocking up a decade as its executive director. The IEA has 32 member countries. Australia is one of them, and historically, only 10 days ago, they collectively agreed to mobilise the largest ever release of oil into markets at 400 million barrels. Never been done before, so that's no mean feat under his leadership. There's much to talk about, so at the outset, let's please welcome Fatih Birol as our special guest for today's Westpac National Press Club appearance. All right, Dr. Birol, we'll get an update substantively from you on the current outlook, but I'd be curious to ask at the outset, the mere fact that you are in Australia, on this side of the world, in this time zone, there would have been ample opportunities for you to cancel, and I guess that would have been understood by many, including us here at the club. Why are you here, and what does it say about the acute energy security exposure of the Asia Pacific that you are here?
Why I am here? So I thought you would be happy that I am here. So now, to be honest with you, I decided to come here, in fact, a few months ago. Of course, we didn't know how the situation would evolve at that time. And looking at the crisis we are in, Asia is at the forefront of this crisis. I started today with Australia. I am having this event, and afterwards with the Prime Minister. Tomorrow I am flying to Tokyo to meet the Mrs. Prime Minister. Maybe afterwards another Asian country. because this part of the world is at the forefront. So I thought I should come here, consult with our member governments and others, and back to Paris Friday morning for a G7 meeting.
All right, I can imagine the demands on your time are relentless at the moment. Why don't you give us the latest assessment of the situation? Firstly, on the war itself, if you can see through some of the public bluster, many of us can't, but perhaps you can. What do you think the situation is with supplies, with the Strait of Hormuz?
The situation is very severe, I can tell you that. In fact, as it started some 3 weeks ago, I decided not to talk to press 3 weeks. But last Friday, I thought I should say a few things because I thought the depth of the problem was not well appreciated by the decision makers around the world. Let me explain you how challenging the situation is. Many of us remember the 2 consecutive oil crises in 1970s, 1973 and 1979. And at that time, in each of the crises, the world has lost about 5 million barrels per day. Both of them together, 10 million barrels per day. And after that, we all know that there was major economic problems around the world, the recessions. And today, only as of today, we lost 11 million barrels per day. So more than 2 major oil shocks put together. Plus, after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the gas markets, especially in Europe, we lost about 75 billion cubic meters, 75 BCM. And as of now, as a result of this crisis, we lost about 140 BCM, almost twice. So the situation is, if we want to put in a context, this crisis, as things stand now, 2 oil crises and 1 gas crisis put all together. And, if I may, not only oil and gas, some of the vital arteries of the global economy, such as petrochemical, such as fertilizers, such as sulfur, such as helium, their trade is all interrupted, which would have serious consequences for the global economy. It is the reason I decided to make statements, and I understand now it is better understood.
I appreciate you're not a political commentator, but you are an analyst of the situation. You'd be aware that President Trump has issued this public ultimatum to Iran to reopen the Strait of Hormuz or face further attacks on power plants, water infrastructure and the like. Do you see any prospects for negotiated, even if only partial, guarantee of safe passage of shipping through that strait?
So I will not make any political or military comments, but you mentioned a few minutes ago what we have done as International Energy Agency in order to comfort the markets. On 11th of March, we released 400 million barrels of oil, which is historic. We have never released so much oil to the markets. And it was not the easiest thing, but we had a unanimous decision of all our member countries. After we announced this, oil prices went down by $18, which is a good reduction. But after the bombings and started, they all went up again. Now we have recently released some demand-side measures, how we can reduce the demand. But what we are doing is, to be very frank, to reduce the pain on the economy. The single most important solution to this problem is opening up the Hormuz Strait as things stand now.
So just on the 400 million barrel release, as you say, prices went down, but they've well and truly come up since then. Brent crude at 112 US a barrel. What can you say about the success of that intervention, that release program, given where prices are and perhaps where they're still to go? Was it about price capping or was it about security of supply?
So two things. One, as soon as the information was available about our stock release, it went down by $18. It gave a comfort to the market. Plus, when I announced this, during my announcement, I said, this is only a portion of what we can do. It is only 20% of our overall stocks. If needed, we can put more oil in the markets, both crude oil and products, if it is needed. So therefore, again, our stock release will help to comfort the markets, but this is not the solution. It will only help to reduce the pain on the economy. So.
Okay, well, 10, 11 days have passed since that announcement. Mm-hmm. Are you mobilising for further releases? Do you see conditions are necessary for further releases?
Now, currently, I am consulting with the governments, as I said, in Asia, in Europe. I am on a daily basis in contact with the colleagues in North America and in Middle East, with Saudi Arabia and others, as well as other major consuming countries such as India and China. We will see, we will look at the markets. If it is necessary, of course, we will do it. But we will look at the conditions, we will analyze, assess the markets and discuss with our member countries.
So what might be a trigger for that, in that making of the decision on what is necessary? Is it a price benchmark? We are hearing estimates, and you are too, from Saudi Arabia, if this drags on into April, of hitting $150, others comfortably predicting $120. What's the level at which a further intervention might be required?
I wouldn't quote any specific price level, but I have to discuss with my member governments and make a good assessment of the markets, and then I will move afterwards.
Many countries are starting to adopt defensive positions on their own fuel stock holdings presently for different reasons. Iraq has declared contractual force majeure on supplies from some of its plants. China, at least until the end of March, has put a pause on exports of petrol, diesel and jet fuel. Do you view this as an expanding trend from major importers and refiners?
I see that there is a growing problem in Asia, immediate problem in Asian countries, and this issue, especially in the context of products, diesel and jet fuel, we will feel it more and more in Europe and beyond. It is coming through. Of course, again, countries have their stocks. We have our stocks, and we are incentivizing many countries who have refineries to move faster than they normally do. And we are talking with the countries who are oil exporters, but not in this region, to increase the oil production. I can give you two examples. One of them is Canada. Talking with the Canadian minister, they have postponed some of the maintenance work and increased the production. The other one is Mexico, also moving in that direction.
With a view to them exporting
more
to the Asia-Pacific in particular?
More to the markets. Of course, Asia-Pacific, I am sure, will be one of the first destinations.
Okay, Dr. Birol, I don't want to dominate too much of the time because I'm conscious that the colleagues in the room have many questions. One last one from me for now that specifically relates to Australia. This country has willfully ignored through successive governments the IEA's minimum requirement to hold 90 days supply for fuel security. At the early stages of this crisis, we currently have 30 days for diesel, 30 days for jet fuel, and about 38 days for petrol gasoline. Because of the uncertainties that are specific to this country, its geographic location, how worried should Australians be about those levels of holdings right now?
So you are right. Successive governments were not able to reach the 90 days stock level that the IEA membership requires. And I know from this very government that they are doing their best to increase those levels. And I checked, for example, for diesel, they have doubled the diesel stocks, but still, as you mentioned, about 38 days, if I'm not wrong. And I very much hope that after this very event, there are some positive steps in that direction. But let's don't forget that Australia also makes a major contribution to regional energy security.
So just explain that.
Yeah.
How much of a bargaining chip are Australia's LNG exports, given Asia's reliability on it and the fact that Qatar is exporting zero at present? So Australia is now at number one or number two in the world. How crucial is that to any negotiated fuel supply this country does with Korea, with Japan, with Taiwan, potentially even with China?
Yeah. So it is, I was about to say that years and years, Australia have been one of the cornerstones of the regional energy security by providing a lot of LNG to the markets. And now it is more important, more vital than ever. And but Australia alone will not be able to offset the entire lack of LNG coming from Middle East. But there will be some new LNG facilities coming to the market from Australia and elsewhere. I hope we can manage that through that. And I see that in many countries, also the countries that have a dual firing power plants, they are also in the meantime going from LNG to coal as another option.
All right. Just back on our 38-day holdings of different forms of liquid fuel supply, given the developed nature of this economy, its size and location, is there a threshold there which you think would cause you alarm if you were a policy maker? Would it be 20 days? Would it be 15 days? How far below 30 before serious behavioural change is required, either through government intervention or people picking up the recommendations that you made on Friday?
I think the 38 days is a solid number, and I know that more ships will be sailing through and bringing more diesel and other products to the markets. But there is nothing wrong. There is nothing wrong to adopt some of the measures, demand-side measures we have suggested. It can also help to reduce the economic burden for the pocket, not only for the prepared for the rainy days. So I am not yet terribly worried as some of the papers I read in this country since yesterday.
Well, there certainly are some worried people in this country. I can inform you of that much, Dr. Birol. I know you're only here for 24 hours or so, but there's a lot going on here as elsewhere. Let's bring in the colleagues. Andrew Probyn from the Nine Network.
Thanks, Greg. Welcome to Australia, Dr. Birol. As Greg said in his introduction, you worked with OPEC for a long time. One of OPEC's founding members is Iran. You perhaps understand its national psychology more than anyone in this room. Given that, and given the recognised fragility of the energy infrastructure in the region, what is your advice to Donald Trump when it comes to his threat and the potential repercussions from attacking their energy infrastructure, given that fragility that you've talked of?
I think I wouldn't give any advice to the President of the United States. I am sure he has many advisors around him. But what I would say is that the global economy is facing a major threat today. And I very much hope that this issue will be resolved as soon as possible. We always talk about the oil, gas, the LNG and the others, but I can tell you, putting energy aside, many people are losing their lives, and there's a lot of suffering. In fact, I would like to take this opportunity to express my condolences to those who lose their lives there. And I very much hope that there will be a peaceful solution to this issue, and the Strait of Hormuz is open as soon as possible to the trade of oil, gas, and other vital commodities.
Iran's relationship with its other OPEC colleagues has been somewhat strained over many decades. What can you tell us of their attitude when it comes to their own energy, and how perhaps that might influence their behaviour?
I think every country, it can be Iran, it can be country X, Y, or Z, if they have significant amount of oil and gas resources, they would like to sell it to the markets at a price that the markets do determine, and would like to have a trade with the others. But the current conditions, political conditions, do not allow this for the time being. And I hope this oil and gas in Iran and other countries in the Middle East would meet the consumers, importers as soon as possible, in order to avoid a major problem for the global economy.
All right, let's move on. There are many questions here in the room today. Anna Henderson joins us from SBS.
Thank you, Dr. Birol. Could I ask you whether you're having these meetings with the Australian government, including the Prime Minister, would you like to see the Australian government encouraging more of those household decisions to try and conserve energy at the moment? Your report talks about working from home, reducing highway speed limits, avoiding business air travel. Do you think that the Australian government needs to really lean into encouraging Australians to do more of that now? Are you surprised that we don't have fuel rationing in Australia already? And just finally, at some stage, do you think Australia will be obligated to share fuel with Pacific neighbours that don't have a lot of fuel supplies in their own countries?
Mm-hmm. So these measures we have announced last Friday are based on our years of experience. We look at what works, what doesn't work, and there were real life tests for that, such as after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, European countries adopted these measures, and as it was announced by the European governments, it helped them a lot to go through these difficult times without Russian energy, with some bruises, but keeping the lights on. So as soon as I announced them on Friday, we heard from many governments in Europe, but also this part of the world, they have already adopted some. I heard from Indonesia, I heard from Cambodia, Vietnam, UK, and the others. It's up to governments to pick up. Every society has its own habits, its own culture. Governments have their priorities. But we put them on the table so that they have a guidance. Some of them pick it up, some of them not. Some of them picked up early, some of them we may pick up later. But they are proven, and they help a lot to save energy. If it is not for the sake of the stocks or the crisis, it is good for saving energy budget for the households and for the industry. I will, of course, I discussed this morning with my colleague and friend, Chris Bowen. I will discuss this afternoon with Mr. Prime Minister. I will share with them. Again, it's up to them to pick it up or not. But the other question, whether Australia should support the Pacific Islands and the countries around Australia, I think if the conditions lead us to that point, I am sure, as Australia is a great friend of those countries, they will do so without hesitation if the conditions allow them to do.
Sorry to interrupt, but do you see it as an obligation or something that the Australian government will just decide if they can spare the fuel?
I think they feel good enough for those countries, strong enough for those countries, close enough for those countries that they will do if the conditions are needed.
All right. Mike Foley is here from the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age.
Thanks, Dr. Birol. You mentioned, Australia as a cornerstone of global energy exports with our, LNG and coal industries, but Australia is also a major importer of refined fuels, more than 80%, as you know. We've seen, China starting to reserve their fuel exports, and that could be a risk to Australia. Just wondering what you could tell us about the impacts to global energy markets and to energy supplies in the region if there is further reserving of refined fuel exports, and also do you have a message for nations that may be starting to reserve fuel exports?
I think this is the challenge we are facing is a global challenge. I think no country will be immune to the effects of this crisis if it continues to go in this direction. So there is a need for global efforts around the world. It is the very reason that we are, as International Energy Agency, talking with all the governments you mentioned, from the Chinese government to US government, the Middle East, here and in Europe, to make everybody come together and make their best to address this issue. So I think it is, of course, every country first looks at its own domestic interest, but in such a situation to have serious export restrictions without justification might not be something which gets plus points from the international community.
Could there be a threat to the levels of necessary global refined fuel exports? Will there be shortfalls if that reservation kicks in around the region?
I wouldn't pinpoint any country, but I really hope, I insist that it is a major problem for everybody, and all the countries should make their best in order to address this issue altogether. And if a country, without justification, the restricts export of refined products, this country will not get plus points from the international community. Thank you.
From the ABC, Samantha Dick.
Thank you very much, Dr. Birol. Electrification is widely seen as a way to reduce the world's exposure to global energy shocks, but Australia is not Europe. Our freight has to travel very long distances and it runs mainly on diesel. Our uptake of electric vehicles has also been comparatively slow as well. What are some of the unique challenges that Australia faces in this area, and what can the government be doing about it?
In the area of transportation?
Yes.
Okay. So can I give a bit of longer answer to this?
You're our guest.
Okay, thank you. So I would like to say the following. When you look at the 1970s, the crisis that we went through altogether, there were a major policy response around the world after it finished. There were at least three important areas that this response reshaped the energy world and the geopolitics of energy. The first one was, we have seen huge amount of wave of nuclear power built around the world, 170 gigawatts in a very short period of time. About 40% of the nuclear power plants we have today were built as a response to this, the oil price shocks. The second one was on the car or transportation sector. Just before those oil price crisis, an average car in the world for 100 kilometers consume about 20 liters of gasoline, and as a result of fuel efficiency measures, it is halved in 10 years of time. So you need about 10 liters. The third one was the diversification from the regions that countries thought this is a risky one. And for example, Europe moving to Russia at that time, they saw it was a safer bet, was a reason to go from Middle East to Russia. So I think these things, this time we will see the same or similar responses. And one of them, in my view, responses will be on the transportation sector, further and further push for the electrification of the transportation sector. So I can tell you, 5 years ago, only 5% of the cars sold in the world was electric. And last year, 25% of all the cars sold was electric. And I think what happened now will give a further boost to transportation sector among other areas. And Australia, I know in Australia, a bit, as you rightly mentioned, a bit behind Europe and China and even some of the Asia-Pacific countries, but I expect in Australia and other parts of the world, we will see further electrification of the transportation sector.
Since you mentioned it, do you think this current crisis should or could trigger a policy rethink in this country about nuclear energy?
I think, I mean, many people know here, I have friends since following, I am very bullish on nuclear power. I can tell you, you mentioned I am in France, in Paris, another beautiful city like Canberra. I would say that President Macron, whom I really appreciate a lot, when he took office first time, he said that at that time the share of nuclear power in the French electricity mix was 75%. And he said he's going to bring it down to 50% because there was a coalition with another party. At that time, when a French newspaper asked me, what do you think? I said, France, bring the share of nuclear down is something like selling the Eiffel Tower to somebody else. Because this is our national asset, French national asset. The same for Germany. I said many times, Germany made a historical mistake by shutting down the nuclear power plants which were working like a Swiss clock. So, and we are seeing a big comeback of nuclear power around the world, but not every country needs to build nuclear power plant if they need it or not. For example, in this country, there is a lot of solar. You are really, if I was Australia, I will be very, very proud what you have achieved here for solar and the domestic batteries. But Australia can win from the response. As I said, one response will be after this event will be the car manufacturing. Second one will be further nuclear going, and Australia can win being a major uranium supplier. But in my view, if somebody asks me, does Australia need today build a nuclear power plant, I would say no, but make the most out of the uranium reserves you have.
Thank you. Sarah Iceland from The Australian.
Thank you again for your address. Obviously, among your suggestions on Friday was potentially working from home more so. There has been some concern from businesses because of the memory of COVID, and for smaller businesses, the foot traffic issue and all of this has caused a little bit of worry. But do you think, given the scale of the fuel crisis, weathering a bit of that economic pain, particularly in the short term, is somewhat necessary when you're considering what is a global crisis to weather that pain?
I think in some countries we have to do it immediately. In some countries we have to wait and see. And if there was a peaceful solution to the problem, if the Strait of Hormuz is open, then we may say that this is not needed anymore. But I think this is a cautionary measure. I want to tell you something. If there was today, hopefully very soon, peaceful solution and the Strait of Hormuz is open, we are following the damage on all the energy assets there. I checked yesterday with my colleagues in Paris. There are at least 40 energy assets in the region are severely or very severely damaged, okay, and across 9 countries. So it will take some time. These assets, these oil fields, gas fields, refineries, pipelines, will come to the normal capacity that they were running before the war. So therefore, our cautionary measures are not obligation for each country to do it this way or that way. But I should say, as a head of the IEA, I'm happy to see that many countries are adopting them in different ways. Some countries are looking at the speed limit reduction. Some countries, as you rightly mentioned, working from home. And we may need it for some time, I would say, unfortunately.
Is it something that you think you might speak to Chris Bowen about? Particularly, you mentioned the government should lead by example through public sector measures. We have a quite centralised public sector, at least in Canberra. Is that something that, you know, for people like working from home in the public sector already, we have quite a lot of them doing that here anyway. Is it something you imagine the two of you will discuss?
I discussed with Mr. Minister all of these options. It is up to him and the Prime Minister and the other leaders to choose. But we put all the options, the menu of the options on the table. It's up to them to choose. And of course, up to the society, whether or not they will pick it up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cam Redden is from Sky News.
Thank you, Greg. Dr. Birol, thank you. If I can ask you to build on the answer you just gave there. You mentioned in your opening remarks that the depth of this problem is not being well appreciated by many of the people making these decisions.
Yeah.
When Australia's leaders look at the recommendations you've made and hear you speak today, is the takeaway message that it would be better to act sooner and harder rather than wait too long and then have to play catch-up later?
Yeah. Maybe I will first explain myself better. Of course, all the world leaders understood and the government leaders how serious the challenge was. But I thought the reason I went after 3 weeks of a no press ban at the IEA to my colleagues and myself is that the depth was not well understood. So what is that? The amount of oil, I just say simply, the amount of oil we lost is equal to 2 oil price shocks in the 70s, which led the world to recession. And this is more than 2 of them, and plus gas, I mentioned. Plus, it is not only oil and gas, all these petrochemical products, the sulfur, the many different fertilizers, very important fertilizers. If it is prolonged, we may well have implications for the agriculture sector and food prices. So this is the reason I spoke up, and I'm very happy that now there is I hope, better recognition now. But in Australia, it is well understood when I talked with Chris, Bowen, and I'm sure Mr. Prime Minister, when they will pick up these measures that we have suggested, 10 measures, the menu of options, it is up to them. We shouldn't be too late, but we shouldn't be just jump on it. It's up to governments to assess the countries, the energy situation, and make their decision accordingly. But I put all the options on the table.
When you made those recommendations, like greater use of work from home, did you have in mind a COVID-style mandate? And do you think the public in some ways might be more accepting or less accepting because of the COVID experience?
I think the different parts of the world have different reactions. For example, in Europe, the effects of the crisis are not well understood yet. But Asia is at the forefront. If I had this press conference in Europe, I would have received different questions and different manner. You asked me why did you come to Canberra. It was not a very kind question, but this is still the reason is that Asia is at the forefront because of the very, very strong reliance on the state of Hormuz here. So it is the reason I came to Asia. Of course, it's always a pleasure to come to Canberra and to meet friends and colleagues here, including Mr. Prime Minister.
We appreciate your presence and your openness to talk to the press. Now, Caitlin Rintoul from The West Australian.
Thank you for your time today. In terms of those demand-side measures, should they be adopted in an order of priority? Is there also concern that smaller nations are taking on that burden and taking that accountability? And then with the fuel rationing, we've seen some nations like Sri Lanka limiting their motorists down to 15 litres per week. What's the metric behind that? What's your advice to Australia if they did adopt fuel rationing, and what limit should we potentially adopt?
Of this, the measures that we have suggested, it is a global suggestion. For some countries, it's easier to pick up number 3, the other one working from home, the other one reducing the speed limit. For example, in Europe, this wouldn't be a major problem to reduce the speed limits. It is up to countries and their culture, their adaptability, their needs, up to them to decide. I'm afraid what we are going to see some countries, especially emerging and developing countries, the rationing will come earlier than some others. And not only for the, you are thinking of the transportation sector, but I am also thinking of the industry sector. We may well see the capacity of running some of the factories maybe lower in the next days and weeks to come if the crisis is not resolved. So this is, we talk about Australia, we talk about Europe, but I should mention that the countries who will suffer the most from this will be the emerging and developing countries who import energy. Because the financial muscles are much weaker. Their currencies are weaker vis-a-vis the hard currencies. And remember, again, I go back to 1970s. Many of the emerging and developing countries in this region, or also in Latin America, went to a spiral of international foreign debt, and which became a major problem for those countries and years to come.
It's a sobering picture you paint here today, Dr. Birol. Ryan Kropp is here from the Australian Financial Review.
Thank you, Dr. Birol. As I understand, part of the reason you're out here is to discuss COP with Australia, as it were. Australia is the current president of negotiations at COP. At COP28, nations agreed to transition away from fossil fuels. If anything, this crisis has shown how reliant the world still is. Do you think that this crisis will slow momentum for the energy transition, or will it accelerate it? I mean, you've spoken about transportation, but more broadly.
Yeah. So it is great that I get a question about COP31. You have the AFR, you said, no?
Yeah.
Okay, very good. So I think COP31 hopefully will be an occasion in order to accelerate the transition to advanced technologies, including clean energy. And I am very happy that Australia and Turkey are going to co-lead this effort. I was last month, I had a meeting with the President of Turkey, Mr. Erdogan, and I am happy that I am going to meet tomorrow the Mr. Albanese. To be honest with you, clean energy transition is going very strongly. If I may, I give you one number. Last year, of all power plants installed in the world, all of the entire world, all power plants, oil, gas, coal, nuclear, renewables, 85% were renewables. 85% renewables, out of which only solar, 75%. And it is amazing. 10 years ago, solar was a romantic story. But now it is a business. People go for solar. Another one which got a big push in the last year was batteries. The batteries installation increased about 40% increase. And here, again, Australia, the domestic batteries, a big push there is something noteworthy. So I very much hope that these areas, the Australia and Turkey together, use the COP31 in order to accelerate this effort. Maybe one last point, COP28, the decision was taken that the renewables would grow by a factor of 3. In fact, we have suggested that. And as the things start now, renewables will grow not very far from that, 2.6 times to that. And I expect, again, one of the responses to this crisis will be acceleration of renewables, because not only because they are helping to reduce the emissions, but they are also homegrown domestic energy source, and they will also increase. In Europe, for example, after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, one of the measures that the countries push was the renewable to increase even faster, and they have simplified all this licensing and permitting processes. And we have seen in Europe since 2022 the phenomenal growth of renewables, mainly driven by security concerns, not only climate concerns. Of course, it helps the climate. So COP31, hopefully it will be a successful one in a beautiful city, Antalya.
I thought you were going to say Canberra.
It's Canberra, as beautiful as Canberra and Paris, I should say. But I hope we will get good. I know that Mr. Brown and Mr. Krum are working very good together to have a successful one. Thank you.
Right, we'll keep pushing through our list of journalists in the room. Corrie McLeod is from Innovation Oz.
Thank you for being here. The Australian government earlier today set out its expectations for the data centre industry, part of which includes that the data centre projects must meet their energy needs through investment in renewables and battery tech and ensure they don't impact energy pricing for consumers and local businesses. Australia is about to take on a huge amount of investment into the country. From your experience overseas, what do you see as the best strategies for enabling digital infrastructure but safeguarding energy grids and prices?
So data centers and in general artificial intelligence is, in my view, the most consequential innovation of the humanity up to now. It will change a lot of things, changing from defense to economy, from economy to the social life. And there is a race among the countries, US, China, Europe, Australia, India, Middle East, who will be has a good position, pole position in the race of artificial intelligence. It's a very serious one. What will determine this? Who will win the race? Two things. One is the technology, the software part. The second one, and for me it is very important, is the who will have a lot of electricity. And because for the data centers, you need electricity 24/7 electricity. And just to give you an order of magnitude, one medium-sized data center, okay, consumes electricity as much as a town with 100,000 households. So huge. They eat, they are very hungry for electricity. Now, therefore, I believe countries like Australia, which has a lot of resources, need to generate electricity as much as possible. And in fact, if you look at it globally, I have called 2 years ago that we are entering the age of electricity. What does it mean? It means the following. We will still use oil and gas. There have been oil and gas colleagues here. They shouldn't be uncomfortable. We'll use oil and gas. But the electricity demand globally is now growing 2 times faster than total energy demand, driven by the, as you mentioned, the data centers, electric cars, and you would be surprised, increasing number of air conditioners around the world. Okay, so therefore, who will generate how much electricity is important and the cost of electricity? This will determine the data centers and who will win the AI race. So therefore, when I talked with Chris Bowen this morning, I was very heartened that he keeps an eye on the electricity sector and will try to do as much as possible in order to bring more electricity to the markets, feeding the data centers, feeding the electric cars, and of course the households and the beyond.
I think he is very busy on that front, and that was before we got to the current crisis. Tom McElroy is here from The Guardian, Australia.
Thank you for taking our questions, Dr. Birol. Could you give us a sense of the contribution you think renewables are making to mitigating the current crisis around the world? You've said you hope they increase. How significant is the difference between this crisis and the previous oil shocks that you've discussed?
So the previous oil shocks were, I mean, many of you know, I have John Ryan, one of the veterans of one of my colleagues at the IEA board. Many of you may remember it had devastating impacts for the global economy. And but at that time, when we respond to that crisis, we didn't have much options as much as we have now. We have more options to deal with that crisis. What are those options? One of them is renewables came to maturity. I mean, think about the renewables 50 years ago and now. Solar, wind, we were nowhere close to this one. So we have a lot of opportunities here. And plus, we should not underestimate the growth coming from the batteries. This will be a big game changer in terms of the solar and wind becoming a even bigger part of the energy sector. Plus the nuclear power. Nuclear is making a big comeback. I can tell you, I have said it 4 years ago, and it's coming very strong. This will also help to that. And therefore, renewables will play a big role here, and not driven by again, climate change concerns. The main driver will not be climate change. The main driver will be energy security. It's homegrown. So I have to tell you, perhaps one thing about, can I say something positive about Australia?
Yes,
okay,
please.
Thank you very much. So I believe, when I look at a few things, the resources that Australia has, from LNG to lithium, from lithium to copper, from copper to cobalt, and all of these things, number one. Second, Australia's reputation being a trustworthy partner. This is something very important, especially will be more important after this crisis we go. Not only that region the problems are, but more globally. This is the second one. And third, in my view, very important, you have I can tell you, you have a very good here in Australia government. I know Prime Minister, I know Chris, I know Madeleine King, they have a very good team. I really hope that Australia make a big move based on this, a lot of resources, huge opportunity, geopolitical opportunity, being a trustworthy trade partner, and the predictable investment environment for the businesses. Bring this all together, Australia can well be a rising star of the global energy economy, because you have everything here. So this is what I would like to say. And I am very hopeful.
Well, that's an optimism you don't always hear reflected in public debate in this country, so it is interesting.
And I speak based on, I'm a man of numbers. I speak based on numbers here.
All right. Jessica Wang is from the Daily Telegraph.
Thank you, Dr. Birol, for your time. I was wondering if you might share your reflections on what you see as the responsibility of governments in communicating the depth of the problem, as you put it yourself, not just to business and industry, but to ordinary households, and whether you think ordinary households are prepared for the scale of the problem presented by the conflict in the Middle East, especially when it comes to the behavioural changes that might be asked of them as this conflict continues.
So this is a crisis situation, and when there's a crisis and when there's a problem, who will be in charge? The governments. So I think the main responsibility to address this problem will be governments, and in different parts, in different sectors, governments need to, expected to take the measures in order to protect their economies, their citizens, their businesses. The primary responsibility lies with the governments, with the help of industry, of course, with the help of citizens. It is if we can all move together, like as you mentioned during the time of COVID, we can address this issue. But the primary responsibility is with the governments to mobilize all of us together, not only in Australia, but across the world.
And do you think households are prepared for what they may be called on to sort of do, or the behavioural change needed as the crisis progresses?
I think I wouldn't say definitely yes, but the households need to be better informed about the magnitude of the challenge we are facing. I think they'll be better prepared if they understood what kind of challenge we are facing today. But hopefully, before they understand what the problem is, the problem will be hopefully solved in a peaceful manner. But as I said, even the peace is made immediately, it will take some time to come back to the normal days we had before the war has started.
Just a small bit of housekeeping before we move to our new question. It goes without saying that Dr. Birol is very much in demand at the moment, and his team has expressed a wish that we try to confine ourselves to 1 hour. So we'll do that. We may not get to every question in the room. We are prioritising those who are here. So with that said, Jacob Stamen from AAP.
Thank you for your address, Dr. Birol. Just earlier you mentioned that Australia is a trustworthy energy partner in the Asia-Pacific region. There is a sense among many in the Australian community that Australian taxpayers don't receive a fair share from Australia's oil and gas resources, and especially when compared to countries like Norway, which have a higher share of royalties from exports. I just want to get your take on how increasing taxes on gas exports would impact Australia's standing in the region as a trustworthy energy supplier, and also wanted to see what you thought the role of oil and gas companies was in supporting consumers through the crisis.
I think the oil and gas companies, I talked with many leaders of the oil and gas companies around the world, and I know that they are all, the ones I talk, they are all ready to overcome this difficulty with the citizens of their countries and beyond. Now, one of the important things for, and I can tell you, I don't believe that the companies will move in a greedy manner. I expect that they move in a direction of supporting the efforts of the governments. Coming back to taxation, additional taxation here, it's up to governments to decide what they are going to do. But for the countries like Australia, which is a AAA reputation for predictability for investments, I would be very careful to implement the sudden, abrupt changes to the tax regimes. I would be thinking what are the implications for getting further investments, because the investors, I can tell you, it is a metaphor that I use. I am also the chair of Davos World Economic Forum Energy Board. I tell the investors that energy investors are like butterflies. When they are scared, they fly away. So we should be careful. A country like Australia, which will hopefully make more of its resources, that those companies feel that the investment framework is predictable for them. But at the same time, it is important that the consumers, citizens of this country, which are the real owners of the resource endowment, get their fair share from the profits that those companies are making.
Yeah, that's resource taxation that you're talking about. What about consumer taxes like excise? I see that the Austrian government, perhaps first among European nations, cut theirs late last week or on Saturday. It's been kicked around as an option here. Is that productive or counterproductive to supply and security right now?
So one thing I want to say before our city, because I live in Vienna many years, by the way. It's also a beautiful city. Talking about the beautiful city, it's also a beautiful city. Not very exciting like Canberra, but it's very, 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 very beautiful city. I would say that the short-term measures and their consequences, we have to think very carefully. There may be short-term measures to protect the consumers, temporary measures, but to play with the taxes may give the wrong signal to the consumers in the long term. I can accept it for a short term, for a short period of time, but we should be careful about giving the signal in the long term to the consumers.
Okay, well, acting in good faith with Dr. Birol, we will only have time for one more. We are really trying to land this as close to bang on the hour as we can. So apologies to those we won't get to today. But with that said, the final question goes to Ron Myerson from the AFR.
Dr. Birol, thank you. Perhaps I'll get you to end, hopefully on a hopeful note. Could you give us your view in 10 years' time, a bit of blue sky thinking? What does the world energy market look like for the best outcomes for the global consumers?
10 years is easier than 10 hours in this context we are in. So I don't know when some of the countries wake up, what will they decide? But 10 years, I see that we will see some technological advancements going through, whatever happens, especially these things will, in my view, further push some technologies, in my view. Solar, not as much as solar, but followed by wind, nuclear power, including small modular reactors. We will see a major transformation of the automotive sector. It is very difficult to step in front of that, but we will still use gas, natural gas. We will still use oil, and in my view, we are going to use energy much more efficiently than today, globally. But if I may, there is one continent we never talk about, which is a continent I feel very close to, which is Africa. So I really hope that we can see Africa having access to electricity. Half of Africa doesn't still have electricity. And I know that Chris Bowen, I discussed with him, he's very keen to put Africa, electrification of Africa, and in general electrification at the heart of COP31, which made me very happy. So I really hope that I am an energy person. I see that as you rightly announced, I worked for OPEC before many years. I followed this. Energy and geopolitics were always interwoven. But I have never ever seen that the geopolitics was dominating the energy sector as much as today. The dark and long shadow of geopolitics and all over energy sector now, and I hope we will see the days that energy is a part of economy, technology, business, and brings happiness to the people rather than being at the center of this geopolitical tensions today. This is my sincere hope.
Thank you.
Well, there's a little bit of something there for everyone, I suppose, a bit of real-world politic as well as some optimism for the future. And it's perfectly understandable that Dr. Birol is living his life in 10-hour chunks at the moment as he moves around this planet. He is very much the man of the moment, and the world is looking to leaders to try and provide some direction during these times. And I think you have today. Europe, as you say, Dr. Birol will soon wake up and start working for the week, and no doubt your comments will be widely reported from here to around the world. So we're fortunate that you've been so generous with your time. Will we all please say thank you to Dr. Fatih Birol.
Thank you very much.